Welcome back. Let's get stuck straight in. I needed to drill and tap a hole in the top of the head for a temperature sensor for the air conditioning. Obviously this engine hasn't been used as aircon before. I'm going to whip the top off so I can get at the inlet manifold. I need to remove the inlet manifold to fit a temperature sensor that opens and closes with heat, obviously, to let vacuum through. And it's basically the cold start enrichment. So once it gets a bit of heat, it closes off the vacuum and closes off the enrichment in the fuel pump. Because everything's vacuum driven on this engine. The start-stop solenoid and the enrichment solenoid. And there's another enrichment which is governed by turbo pressure. So I had to plumb all that into the system. Now once I've got this manifold off, I need to sort out the glow plug wiring loom, as the ends are different. As you'll see in a minute, I have to change all the ends. So I use the loom from the vehicle but the ends from the engine, and then it's just plug and play. Now the temperature sensor, I'll show you in a second, I've had to use, there's like a screw-in core plug that goes into the head. It was just a blank, and I've had to drill and tap that to take this sensor. It doesn't need to go right into the water jacket, it just basically screws into the head, so I've used that plug as an adapter. There you go, there's the glow plug wiring loom. So let's dissect that and put some new ends on it, or old ends, I should say. And this is the loom for the glow plugs that belongs to the vehicle. This is the one I'm going to have to dissect as well to put the ends on of the engine glow plug loom, if that makes sense. But also in this loom there's an extra temperature sensor. I'll show you that wire in a second. That end goes to the car, but it's also got that one there that goes to an extra temperature sensor in the water pump housing, which I've also had to drill and tap and swap the sensor over from the old engine. Right, I've got the two glow plug looms side by side. The one in my hand is off the 605 engine. They're the ends I need to put onto the loom that belongs to the vehicle. The loom that belongs to the vehicle just had ring terminals on the end, and the glow plugs had a threaded end, so you push the ring terminal over the threaded end, put a nut on it, whereas the later 605 glow plug is just a push on. So I'm just taking the plastic caps off. I'll have to heat them up, melt the solder and pull the ends off, and then fit them all onto the loom that belongs to the car. Yay, I think that makes sense. Right, the soldering iron just wasn't cutting it, so I had to get the blowtorch on the job. And for some reason, I took the terminal off and then soldered it straight back on to the same harness. So I had to take it back off again and put it on the other harness. It's confusing editing this because it was really confusing doing it. Right, let's solder it onto the correct harness this time. The ring terminals on the old harness that I need to use, I've just basically cut them off and bared the wire, and then I can solder them in, put the plastic caps on, job done. And excuse the noise from our ferocious guard dog, Dolly. That's the harness done. There's also an original water temperature sensor just there. So there's two water temperature sensors in this loom for some reason. I don't know why. That one at the back of the head, and this other one around on the water pump that I had to drill and tap because it wasn't on the OM605 engine, but it was on the old engine, and I need to use this loom to plug straight into the car. So that's that loom all complete and fitted and ready to plug back into the car. Two temperature sensors and all the glow plugs. Now we get to the enrichment temperature sensor for the vacuum system. Refitting the auxiliary fuel filter. Quick repair on the exhaust heat shield. Now I've made a very rough and temporary exhaust because this is going off to have a 3-inch stainless steel system custom made. So don't judge me on that exhaust. It's not staying on. Now it's time to refit the body. So as I'm lowering it down, I'll just go around and double check that all the bolts are lined up from the body to the chassis. All the rubber mounts are in the right place, all the washers are in the correct place. So it takes a little bit of moving around, a little bit of jiggling around. And just like that, that's the body on and all bolted up. This G-Wagon is unusual in that it's got air conditioning. Really rare for this age of vehicle. It's got the viscous fan down here for cooling the radiator, but they've added an electric fan in for the aircon radiator, I suppose, condenser radiator. And they must have thought, well, what can we mount the fan on? So instead of just making a bracket to hold it, they've made an oil cooler. This is actually full of oil from the power steering. And there's a right old tangle of pipes down there where the oil goes in out of the pump through this slot and then down to the steering box down there. But really quite clever. The only problem it gives me, everything's a bit further forward than a normal one would be, and I've got to mount an intercooler somewhere for the turbo. But we'll get the whole thing plumbed in and working and then figure that one out later. Another small problem. This engine has this timing sensor that goes in that hole down there. I think all it does is run the rev counter. That's about it. The one on the vehicle is like this. And it used to go right down by the sump and pick up the timing marks there. So basically we're going to have to splice this one into that one. It's only 2 wires in there, so it's not too much of a problem. And our good friend John the Sparky, he's coming to sort out the wiring anyway. These plugs here are for the back lights that go into this loom here that run all the way along the chassis to the back. Fuel tank, rear lights, all that sort of stuff. In here, there's the main heavy starter wire, goes into a block here. That's easy sorted, just bolts in. The starter energizer wire here, I cut that, so that needs rejoining. Couldn't find an easy way of unplugging it, so it was easier just to cut it off. Oil pressure sensor down there, that's connected. That one. The wiring's really straightforward. The temperature sensors, I showed you that before, where I've rejigged all that lot. But yeah, pretty straightforward. Plug and play. This thing's not far off running. All the chassis mount bolts are in. These are the outriggers I replaced that have the chassis mounts on. And luckily, they're a perfect fit, so all my measuring was correct. What to do next? The plumbing's, the radiator's in, connected. There was an extra outlet on the head on this one, that's sorted. Basically just block it off, not needed on this setup. What else? Steering column, that's connected. Brake pipes are connected. Everything just needs bleeding. Alternator wires, again, they were snapped off. 2 wires just go into the block there. Again, I'll get John to sort that out. He'll do that neat and tidy. Top earth wires on, lower earth wires on. The vacuum pipes for the turbocharger, and this one goes across to the pump to give it enrichment when it gets boost. I'll need to put a little boost gauge in there just so we know what we're running at, and a bleed valve for adjusting the boost pressure. The extra fuel filter, that mounts up there, but I'll wait till the wiring's done. The vacuum supply from the vacuum pump's connected here, tees off to run all the vacuum control inside. And the servo, it's quite clever. The pump solenoid is worked by vacuum. So the vacuum pipes go all the way to the ignition switch. When the ignition switch is turned on, it allows vacuum to lift the solenoid, so it'll let fuel through and it'll start. When you turn the ignition off, it cuts the vacuum, closes the solenoid, cuts the engine out. So if you get a vacuum pipe split on one of these, it'll just run and you can't turn it off. I think that's how it works, something like that. Heater pipes were slightly different, but I've had to sleeve it there to make that work. The dash has got to come out because the interior heater matrix is leaking. Speedo cable, it follows all the way along and goes through the dash down there somewhere and heads up to the clocks. Again, I've just put it through. I haven't connected it because the dash has got to come out. There's no point. So I just need to carry on with my little list. There's a couple of bolts snapped. I think I'll sort those out next to hold the bracket for that part of the air conditioning. A couple down here, I need to get those out. I'll fit the cross member along here that mounts the radiator, bonnet pull, and the top half of the aircon cooling fan. Just lots of little bits and pieces now. I mean, probably have it running within half an hour, but let's do it properly and get all this stuff done. There's my list. Continue with that. As promised, I readdressed the brake sensors and brake pipe. I had the brake pipe the wrong way around, so I've corrected it and made a longer pipe, and eventually got this bracket the right way round. Let's give everything a huge coating of wax oil, just to keep all those pipes looking nice and new. Protect all the new paint. Ta-da! Clear wax oil. Certain things are starting to make sense now. Why this had an extra fuel filter in it, and the fuel return wasn't in the usual place going into the tank. I couldn't quite get my head around it until the fuel neck realized it's full of holes. So over the years, all the mud and muck's been going into the fuel tank and blocking things up. So taking the fuel tank out again, flushed it out, and it is full of mud. And you can see the pickup pipe, absolutely yuck. And the sender isn't moving anymore. There's a float in there. So we'll have to get a new one of those. So I'm pleased we didn't try to start it, because that would have sent all that mud up my lovely new pipes. So I need to change the extra fuel filter, because no doubt that's clogged. Fuel tank's had a good clean out. New sender. Good to go. Ready to start. All together now. Now, because of this huge front bumper, we've gained a load of space, so we can put a really big intercooler in. And I'm really sorry, I've totally run out of time. Next time, fitting the intercooler, learning how to TIG weld aluminium. And will it start after all this? Thanks for watching, folks. See you next time.